consider supporting my Patreon to see my videos a day early and receive other fun perks. So, Glitch Productions' second big series, Sunset Paradise, came to an end recently, and since I did a review of MetaRunner, I figured I might as well give this show a review too. Also, in case you're wondering, I'm not planning on doing a MetaRunner Season 2 review just because I don't think I'd have a lot to say. Maybe I'll do a review of the show as a whole once it's over, I don't know. If you want the TLDR, I think this was a big improvement. It fixed all the biggest problems I had with Season 1. The animation is miles better, and Lux is a much more interesting character. But enough of MetaRunner Season 2, I'm here to talk about Sunset Paradise. As soon as I saw the initial trailer, I was excited, and I think that excitement mostly paid off. Rather than jumping right into the story, I'm gonna start with the animation because it was the first thing that caught my eye, and I'm assuming most other viewers feel the same. When I first saw the trailer, my reaction was that the show looked good, but I really wanted to play it as a video game. And I think that's what they were going for. I remember Kevin saying they spent a while developing the look of the show, trying to get it to look like a video game, and I think they succeeded in that regard. Specifically, it looks like a higher quality version of A Hat in Time, with the bright colors, unique but simple character designs, and of course, the 2D facial features. The character models all look clean and expressive, and the movements flow really well. They're mostly fast-paced and cartoony, which fits well with the show's tone, and then there's the action. There's a lot of action in this show. Nearly every episode has at least one chase or fight sequence, and it all looks really good. It's well choreographed, the camera angles keep you engaged, and the sheer variety of set pieces and fighting styles keeps things interesting. The environments also look nice. Port Aurora really captures the feel of a bright, happy vacation spot. Each location provides some nice visual variety while still feeling at home in this world. Also, I know I'm bringing up Hat in Time again, but I swear, the main area of Port Aurora reminds me so much of Mafia Town, it's kinda crazy. As for issues with the animation, I don't really have any. There were a handful of moments that seemed awkward, but none of them lasted for more than a second or two. Overall, they had a clear vision of the look they wanted to achieve, and they pulled it off really well. Okay, but enough about the animation. How's the story? Sunset Paradise is essentially a buddy cop show, and the two cops are our main leads, Maggie and Ori. Now, it's incredibly tempting to compare these two to Tari and Theo from MetaRunner, due to one being a more down-to-earth female character from SMG4, and the other being a goofier, more childlike character, but there are a lot of differences here. Tari and Theo had plenty of other allies, while with Maggie and Ori, it's essentially them against the world. Also, while Tari and Theo were partially drawn together because they were both kind of blank slates in a way, Maggie and Ori both have fleshed out backstories. The biggest difference between Maggie and Tari is that this isn't a new Maggie. This is the same Maggie from SMG4, so most of her emotional struggles are carried over from there. Now, you don't need to have seen SMG4 to understand what's going on with her, as everything is kept pretty non-specific, but I'd imagine it'd be pretty distracting in the few instances where she does reference something that happened there. I find it distracting, and I've actually seen those videos. Also, since she's tied to SMG4, how you feel about her character arc hinges heavily on how you feel about the drama in those videos. I'm not gonna go into detail about everything involving Maggie and SMG4, as that could be its own video. I'll just say that it's not all bad, but it's not all good either. Her inner struggle is largely communicated through Shadow Maggie, and it just didn't resonate with me. Maggie's probably the weakest element of the show because while she's fine when she's interacting with others, her whole internal struggle feels really forced and uninteresting. Now for the other half of the dynamic duo, we have Ori. I think they did a better job with his arc as it feels more genuine and doesn't rely on outside media. He starts off as the town deputy, which is pretty funny because there isn't anyone else in law enforcement, meaning he wasn't able to make sheriff when he has literally no competition. And that's reflected in the story. He makes plenty of enemies on the pier from targeting people over petty crimes, but he's completely useless dealing with actual criminals until Maggie shows up. His bumbling incompetence can be pretty funny, and his desire to live up to his grandfather's legacy is pretty sweet. This is definitely the better of the two emotional journeys. Before getting to the villains, there are two other characters to talk about. First, there's Aziz, the incredibly shady ice cream man. man. He's mostly a gag character and his jokes tend to be really funny, but he also serves as a good barometer for how the town views Ori and Maggie at any point in the story he shows up. Then there's Mayora Bora, who's alright. He doesn't really do much till the second half, and my reaction was like, wait, this guy's a character now? He's fine, but nothing special. Now for the villains. After all, in a buddy cop show, you need some villains to bust, and aside from the animation, Sunset Paradise's Rogues Gallery is easily its biggest strength. Not only are the villains good, but they keep getting better as the series goes on. Going in order, first we have the Spud Buds. Yeah, you want an idea of how weird this show can be? The first major villains are a gang of evil baked potatoes. I love their designs. Despite all of them being potatoes, their designs all look so distinct from one another. Admittedly, their personalities aren't super memorable, at least when compared to the other characters, but they still have plenty of funny interactions. Also, I can't get over the fact that the little one has the same voice as Shroomy. Going one step higher, we have Whisk, the character you probably knew about even before knowing this show existed. You see, when Glitch Productions was foreshadowing this show, Whisk was always the character they used, likely because they didn't want to spoil the fact this was Maggie's show. I guess they figured she was the most marketable too, since she's the only villain to have merch. How is she as a character though? Well, she's a stealthy, professional thief who can steal just about anything, so long as she's wearing her mask. The moment it gets knocked off though, she becomes a nervous wreck, which is a pretty funny contrast and gives her a creative weakness. Also, the fact she carries a gun that shows people their own insecurities is a clever bit of theming. Admittedly, with the amount of detail given to us about her personal life in her episodes, I'm surprised they didn't do more with her. Yeah, she's still an active part of the later episodes, but personality-wise, not much happens with her. Up next are the Funky Force, and I'll admit their name kinda bugs me. You see, they spell it F-O-U-R-C-E, like the number 4, but there used to be 5 of them. What were they called back then? It's not a huge deal, especially since their name is only written out a couple times, but it's still weird to me. As for the Funky Force themselves, well, they're pretty great. They're a group of disco dancing superheroes, which is already pretty funny and fun to watch, but there's more. As you can probably tell by the fact I'm mentioning them now, they aren't actually heroes. I don't think that's much of a spoiler considering all the marketing implied they were villains. They brainwash people to commit crimes so they can swoop in and stop them to look like the heroes. Despite all the funny dancing and catchphrases, these guys can be pretty damn intimidating when someone gets on their bad side, making them a pretty engaging threat.
Yeah, just go home, deputy. You look like you're gonna drop dead right here.
Then we get to the crown jewel of the villains, Benedict Cumbersnatch. This guy is great. I'll admit I was a bit disappointed by him near the end, but we'll get to that later. Let's focus on the good stuff for now. First off, his design. He's literally an egg in a fez, yet he's insanely fun to watch due to his movements and facial expressions. Rather than moving his facial features like everyone else, he sort of just wiggles around with a number of static facial expressions that look like they were drawn on with marker, and all of them are a great mix of psychotic and hilarious. His voice strikes a similar balance, starting off cold and intimidating, but getting more angry and deranged as the show goes on. His dialogue's great too. He's clever, yet hilariously evil, and he has so many funny lines in the last few episodes. Speaking of which, I might as well talk about the humor in this show. The tone here is different from Metarunner. While that was a drama with some comedic elements, this show is more of a comedy. Just about every character, even the ones who only show up for a minute or two, are really goofy in their own way, and the animation really boosts the show's frantic, bizarre sense of humor. The vast majority of the jokes land, and they really help bolster this bizarre world. Now with the humor taken care of, I think it's time we get to the plot. Sunset Paradise follows a somewhat simple plot structure. The first 6 episodes have some connections, but are largely episodic, with each villain getting 2 episodes to shine. All the episodes have completely different setups, from pulling off a heist to trying to save the mayor's life. They're all good in their own ways, and each one feels like a mini-adventure that connects to a much larger story. But then, things take a drastic shift at the end of episode 6, and things become much more serialized. And this is where my biggest problem with the show comes in. You see, while I like this show for the most part, I think the last 2 episodes, particularly the final one, are easily the weakest and kind of a letdown. I'm gonna be spoiling things here, so skip ahead if you don't want spoilers. Let's start with my issues with Benedict, since I already foreshadowed overshadowed them. I still really like Benedict, but he fell short of my expectations, which I would say is on me, but it's the show that set my expectations so high to begin with. When he briefly shows up in the earlier episodes, he's intimidating, mysterious, and kind of funny. He's the kind of character you really want to learn more about, and at first, it pays off. Him showing up, freeing everyone, and almost killing Meggy and Ori is pretty intimidating. And the following episode of him taking over the town is probably my favorite of the bunch for a similar reason. The big moment that really sold me was the lighthouse scene. Basically, Benedict tries to get into the lighthouse, but is blocked by a barrier that can only be penetrated by someone with a pure heart. So he goes around town doing a bunch of good deeds in a hilariously violent montage, and then we get this scene.
I am proud to announce that I've returned with a pure heart.
Oh, that's a load. I've been eyeing you from up here. Doing good deeds for bad reasons doesn't mean you have a pure heart.
What? No, I never said the one with the pure heart was me. Goonies, Operation Childlock.
Those are children! Are you mad?
Why, yes. Furious, actually. And these are indeed children with pure, innocent hearts. Goonies, full speed ahead.
Stop this at once!
This is your fault. You could have just dropped the barrier. But no!
That was brutal, dark, brilliant, and hilarious. It's the kind of outside-of-the-box move that made me think Benedict was going to become one of my favorite villains of all time. But he doesn't really do anything like that for the rest of the series. I guess there's the fake out with the lighthouse keeper, but that's not nearly as cool. Part of me feels kinda greedy complaining about this, and I get that I'm probably coming off that way, but after episode 7, I was expecting this guy to do something really crazy and out of nowhere to up the stakes even further during the final battle, but he just didn't. Yeah, okay, he killed Ori, but did anyone really think he was going to stay dead? I guess you could say it's shocking, but killing off a character who's obviously too important to stay dead feels kinda played out at this point, and it just feels like a really empty threat. The Funky Force actually did this kind of escalation better, because the mayor stays dead, and you have no reason to believe he wouldn't. He gets enough screen time for you to remember him, but he's minor enough for you to know he's probably not coming back. Honestly, if it was Benedict who killed him, and he did it in a really brutal and unexpected way, I might not have as much of an issue here. But as is, I was kind of underwhelmed. However, aside from the lack of curveballs, Benedict is still probably the best part of these last few episodes. His lines are so hilariously sadistic, and you could tell his voice actor had a blast going all out.
You think you've stopped me? No. You've just sent me back another 100 years and filled me with more murderous rage than I ever felt before!
And like I said, I still think he's a great villain, just not as great as I was expecting from the earlier episodes. But what about my other issues with the finale? I think the best way to describe them is that they're similar to my problems with the Tatiana fight in No Straight Roads. These episodes aren't bad, but after so many episodes with so many cool setups, it kind of feels like they're going through the motions because it's the finale. The combat in episode 9 is pretty cool. Dealing with multiple Goonies and incapacitating them in creative ways is fun to watch, especially with Benedict taunting Meggy and Ori the whole time. But then the fight in the final episode is just Meggy fighting Whisk, but not even that. It's actually Shadow Meggy, the character I cared least about in this whole show. I really don't care about Meggy's internal struggles, largely because most of her insecurities are pretty underdeveloped, both in this show and in SMG4. I probably would have been more engaged if the fight actually was with Whisk, just because I'm more interested in what's going on with her. And while the action is good, it's really basic. It's just standard hand-to-hand combat in a small, flat arena with Shadow Meggy saying mean things to Meggy, half of which really have nothing to do with her.
People give everything for you, and what do you ever do in return? Nag and complain and boss them around!
Most of the other action sequences were way more engaging because they had so much going on. And as for the fight with Benedict, it was a bit better, but still nothing special. When I remember the action from this show, I'm gonna remember the ice cream parlor shootout and the fights with the Funky Force, not this bog standard final battle. Both seasons of Meta Runner managed to have really engaging final battles, so I'm not entirely sure what happened here. As for the ending, I think it was good. I wish we got an epilogue with Whisk, and it feels like Shadow Meggy gave up way too easily, but it's an overall satisfying end. I especially like the reveal with the Goonies. Despite how negative I was back there, I still really like this show. I just think the drama with Maggie is weak, and the last episode was a letdown. But even then, those elements weren't terrible or anything. Overall, I'd recommend Sunset Paradise. The colorful, lively animation, great action, sense of adventure, off-the-wall humor, and highly memorable villains make it a fun watch. I just think certain elements could have been handled better. I am Defoffilizer, and I'm still excited to see what projects Glitch Productions has in the future. Before leaving, I want to give a thank you to the SMR for supporting me on Patreon. If you want to get shouted out or see my videos a day early, be sure to donate to me there.